All right. Hello. I believe we are live. Um, this is great. All right. Welcome to another campfire chat. This one's maybe extra appropriate for a campfire. Talking about ghost stories. Not really. Not entirely. But I do have some really interesting things to talk about monstrosity and humanity and how we mix, how we don't, how we do. It's such an interesting topic, and I feel like it applies to things like MS, my chronic disease that I deal with, marginality, other things that people do deal with, the flaws, the things that the mistakes that we make, the things that are hard for us. And so, yeah, this is going to be a fun chat, I think. And it was inspired because I watched The Watchers yesterday. It's a movie that just came out, so I will do my best not to spoil anything, but I was absolutely stunned when I saw this movie because it spoke to me in a way that I haven't quite seen for a while. And that doesn't mean there's not great movies out there. I just feel like this one really hit home for me, and part of that is because I have been studying monstrosity. And that sounds kind of weird to say, but there's, before we jump in, there's one YouTube channel I want to call out, which is Storied. It's a PBS run channel on YouTube. Absolutely phenomenal, but especially the Monstrum series. It's the most impactful thing that I've ever watched, I've ever listened to and studied from her studies. Dr. Emily Zarka is the one hosting that, and she talks about specific monsters, what they mean in cultural context, what they mean, what the stories behind them are, and the implications of monsters and humanity. And it's been one of the most uplifting and fantastic things that I've ever seen. So highly recommend go check out Monstrum on YouTube if this tickles your fancy. But it's reduced fear actually for me to learn about these things, and it's also improved my understanding of myself and others, especially when we get to things that we can't explain. And I think monsters start to come into our lives when we think about things like horrific tragedies, terrible murders and violence, and just things that we do to each other as humans that we can't explain. We can't explain why there would be so much hatred, or why something would happen that would be so awful and terrible, and yet it does happen, and that's something we have to grapple with. And I think that's what this movie, The Watchers, does for us. Is it brings us along a journey of discovering what is monstrosity, what is humanity, how do they relate with each other, and how does connection actually pull us out of danger more often than not. So let's dive into it, I guess. We're looking at monstrosity and humanity. I mean, we've all seen Netflix things, or just true crime series, right? There's a very common word you're gonna see in all of them when we're talking about the perpetrator of violence, whether it's a murderer or somebody who's stalking somebody, or any array of of things that are terrible acts perpetrated towards somebody else, and that is monster. We call people monsters all of the time, and I think that's an important thing to keep in mind. I'll just switch over to here's the Watchers in the coop, which is what they call this little building right here, and so they're behind a glass, and I just find it really fascinating that we have language that harkens back to things that are supernatural, things that are unexplainable, and yet we're assigning them to humans still today. we call humans monsters all the time. And that's why I actually want to propose that monstrosity is actually part of humanity. Humanity, sometimes we feel like that's a safe, happy word, like it's about all the goodness that we show. We express our humanity when we're trying to help people, and we do things that go out of our way to for the benefit of somebody else. That's like a beautiful display of humanity. And then when we have these other things happen where there's violence or other harm being done, that's monstrosity. And yet a person still did it. A person is capable of both ends of the spectrum. And so that's why I think that monstrosity is humanity and humanity is monstrosity. It's not two different things. They're actually the same. It's the spectrum of capability that a person has. And I've been surprised that this concept has brought me so much more peace, because we all have to fight the monsters that are inside of us. And I think that that's what this movie starts to kind of pull out. There's some beautiful themes about self-hatred, the monstrosity that we see in ourselves when we come to a mirror. There's a lot of themes with mirrors. Let me see if I can grab a screenshot from that. There's like lots of mirror imagery in this movie. Here's them standing literally in front of the mirror. I put mirror in quotes because my wife and I are still not totally sure if it's a real mirror. It's kind of a more of a glass, because obviously in the daylight you can see through it, but in the nighttime it becomes a mirror. So kind of interesting to think about what that might mean. But anyway, so we have these moments of reflection in the movie. We have these moments of self-hatred and acknowledging this like tortured past, this traumatic past that our main character has. And technically most of these characters do have that trauma in there as well. So there's just something that's so relatable. And if I bring it to myself, I think about MS a lot and monstrosity, because that there's something about the language of monster. It's something that we hate in ourselves, and in others too. And MS kind of pulls that in for me a little bit. It's more of like, not that I'm a monster because I have MS, but that is part of the burden of self-hatred that I carry, because I feel broken. I feel beyond repair. Like my body is literally, it can't get better. It can only get worse, so like there's that, it's just a heavy, it's just a heaviness. I don't know how else to describe it, but it's a heaviness. And then being part of the LGBTQ community is a direct way for me to connect to monstrosity, because I've been told throughout my whole life that community is monstrosity. They've done a great job of demonizing people just like me, just for who we are, and not for any reason other than fear. And fear and monstrosity are very much connected. Obviously, monsters, it just is, it's a scary word. We're used to hearing horror films. This one is technically a horror film. I actually wouldn't quite categorize it as horror, but it's still, that monster is like that darkness, that fear, the unknown, and that's exactly what we do with people that we aren't familiar with, whether we know if they're LGBTQ or not. It can go into racism, it can go into sexism, it can go into xenophobia, being afraid of people that aren't from your country or your city even. We have a long history of this fear of outsiders, and outsiders could be anything, an in-group, like your religion, it could be your race, it could be your tribe in a way, it could be all kinds of ways that we fear other people, and that those groups actually create some fear because when we create a boundary and we stay within that boundary, it's very difficult to not fear what's outside of that boundary. And we've done a great job in the past of making that boundary sacred, and unfortunately sometimes that's to our detriment. So bringing it back to the watchers, I think there's some of that theme in there too, of where fear actually created the monsters that are in this film. And so I just feel like this is really important to kind of struggle with and to accept, is that spectrum of the good and the bad in ourselves. And I think that once we acknowledge that, we actually can become more human and more be able to tap into that side of things more, be able to express those great things that we love about ourselves, about humanity. I think that becomes easier when you are able to acknowledge the really hard, terrible things that are also within us, within every one of us. I think that we have equal parts good and bad, and we access one or the other depending on our choices. And so hopefully we're accessing our good parts more than our bad parts, more consistently, but we always have access to both. And I think that's something that's really important to acknowledge. So if I were to make a claim about this movie, I think one of the big things that I learned from it was that healing or wholeness, it comes from being seen. And that's really, really fascinating because of so much of this mirror imagery that we have. Let's see if I mean, this isn't a mirror specifically, but there's also other themes of like parroting, and there's like literally a parrot here, and there's this like imitation or mimicry, and essentially that's what a mirror is it's a reflection, right? So it's not us in the mirror, it's the reflection of us from the mirror. And a parrot, it repeats what it hears, and there's a lot of this like repetition thing that we see throughout the movie, and it was very striking to me when you see our character Mina looking in the mirror in various parts throughout the movie, because there are several intimate moments where she's looking at herself in a reflection, and I think that the more she sees herself truly, and also the more that we get to see her, there comes this healing in her process, in her journey throughout the movie. And then also in all of the other characters, the more that they are seen, like truly seen beyond the masks, beyond the things that we put up in front of ourselves to kind of protect ourselves, the more we truly see these people, the more they are able to access like wholeness. And especially at the end, that becomes very critical and vital to the resolution of this story. And I think that's right on. I think that's exactly what we need as we look at ourselves. As I think about MS, being seen with MS is important. I don't like it. I don't like that I have to have that be part of me. It's not something I chose. It's something that is harmful. It hurts. It's painful. It's heavy. But by looking at it and seeing it in myself and allowing other people to see it with me, that's been healing for me in a way. Healing in the sense of wholeness. I feel like I can access myself better because of my acknowledgement of the limitations that I have, of the things that I have to deal with, and even setting healthy boundaries, from, taking care of myself, making sure that I am safe, and doing those kinds of things have been difficult but important, and contributes to my wholeness. And so I just really felt like this was a beautiful exposition of this idea of being seen, seeing through mimicry, seeing in imitations, facades, whatever you want to call it. The Watchers does a great job of exploring kind of levels of reality. There's always the reality that we present to people. We can put on wigs, we can put on a mask, a metaphorical mask. We can put forward our best selves, hide our intentions, hide what we're thinking. But that's all an imitation of reality. It's not truly reality. And I'm not saying that you have to take those down to be true, just because there are safety concerns to consider. But that connection that we have with each other, with people, comes by reaching through those masks, by taking down masks, and taking down those barriers, and being vulnerable. And vulnerability comes with risks. That's why it's called vulnerability. So I just, the ending of this was a great exposition of that process. And the thing that I thought was really powerful was the connection and empathy at the end of the story was literally how they were the characters were able to reach through the masks, the imitations that they had on, and actually reach through and connect with each other. And it only happened through that empathy. Empathy has this power to do that. Obviously, you have to be willing, but I feel like empathy is like reaching through the mirror with a hand extended, and then the other person can reach through their mirror, hand extended, and make that connection, like handshake through the mirrors that we have, is kind of how I'm thinking about it anyway. The other thing that I thought this was really fascinating. So this was something my wife pulled out. There's this interesting part where we have to see. I'm trying not to spoil it, so sorry, I'm stumbling with my words a little bit, but there is very subtly, you can see throughout this movie that we have to ask the question, who is the real monster here? And it was just really fascinating to think about how there, in the movie, coming in, it's going to be a monster movie. Like that's from the first 3 seconds of the movie, almost. Like, there's monsters in this movie, monsters. It's really interesting to think about who are the real monsters in this movie, but also in real life. I think that's a pertinent question, because things aren't always what they seem, partially because we all have these things that we present, but also the perception of other people plays a part in how you become a monster or not. So this is a tiny tangent, but I'm reading this beautiful book called An Immense World by Ed Yong, and it's about perception, sensory perception, and things in animals, and kind of exploring the world of senses, how we perceive the world how animals perceive the world, and how different species have vastly different experiences, worldviews, and even just the world that they experience could be completely, absolutely foreign to a human's world, essentially. And really, if I take my professor from psychology in my first year of psychology, he said, perception creates reality. this book has solidified that even more to me, that absolutely our perception creates reality. And so going back to this movie, we have these themes of perception creating monsters, and things may not always be what they seem. Some monstrosity and humanity seem to be kind of fluid in a way. It depends on your perception, and it's not always it's I don't know how to say it without spoiling it, so I'll just move on. But I do think that there's something about that we have to consider. Is my perception actually harming somebody else by turning them into a monster? Am I creating demons out of humans? And I think we see this in our political climate. I think we see this all the time with other groups, other things that we like. I'm even just thinking like teams at work. Like there's so many times when we demonize people, and we assign them monstrous traits just because we are either afraid, we're threatened in some way, or some form of hatred. And I think that looking at monster stories like The Watchers, or like choose any monster, you can learn so much about your own humanity and how we interact with people by studying monsters, because monsters reveal what it is that we're afraid of. They reveal things that we don't want to address. We reveal our own insecurities and our I don't know, the biases that we have. It's all connected. And I think it's a really important thing to consider and to dive deeply into. So again, I highly recommend checking out Monstrum. Again, it's a PBS channel here on YouTube. Absolutely beautiful. It really has reduced the fear that I had, because I have had there actually were some monsters on there that I've actually been deeply afraid of. Since I was a kid, because of some stories that I'd heard, and hearing this different side of things absolutely reduced that fear and anxiety about these monsters. It helped me look at myself in a different light, and it gives me this opportunity to look at movies like The Watchers or other stories that I hear, and really see myself in them, in both the monsters and the humans that are present, and kind of work through some of that trauma that I've had from just life, and kind of work through, let me see myself for real once. Like let me take a look at myself, unfiltered, and just look, because again, healing and wholeness, it comes from being seen. And so I those are some things I highly recommend checking out. I also, just do a quick plug, I have a weekly newsletter that explores humanity as well as technology, because I think there's even some monstrosity in technology, whether that's explicit or implicit, that we deal with. And so I've left it in the description. You can go ahead and sign up for that newsletter if you'd like to hear more about that. But I am exploring kind of this idea of like, how do we express our humanity without being dominated by technology, and bolstering our creativity and our productivity even, but definitely exploring humanity. So if you like that as well, that's another resource that's out there for you. But I really hope that we can start to acknowledge those deep, scary parts in ourselves, so that we can start connecting with other people, and try to stop demonizing other people, even when maybe they deserve it. Going back to like true crime stuff, maybe they do deserve some kind of a punishment for their crimes or their actions. Maybe they have done things that are abominable, but they are still humans, and we do need to acknowledge that. We do need to acknowledge that what they've done is something that we're capable of, and just because we didn't happen to be in that situation, we need to make sure that we're looking at ourselves and making sure that we're in line with our values, but also extending compassion and humanity to others, because it actually, by demonizing and turning others into monsters, we are also in danger of doing the exact same thing to ourselves in that same process. So I think that's what is a beautiful message about this movie, and I would definitely encourage you to watch it. And obviously take care of yourselves and make the decision for yourself. And but yeah, I highly recommend it. And thanks so much for joining me for this campfire chat.